Kids would poke fun at him and dip his curls in the inkwells because they were jealous of him and his hair. And he was just a young man when he started traveling to Europe, to Africa. Brought back plumes, ostrich plumes and Irish linen and stuff like that from his trips.
What was the person that he sailed on with the ship, that celebrity gal?
Oh, I can't
Elsa Maxwell?
Elsa Maxwell, yeah, I've got pictures, and I
Big
have,
society person.
she planned parties for the rich, especially aboard ships and that. And they're in the albums, Judy should have them, are pictures that were taken with her when he was traveling.
Where did he go to school?
To Central High School. Just, I think, just for a little bit. Because then he went, started traveling with Northern Fire. They built fire equipment. And he and this Elmer and Ted Pagel, they designed pumps for Northern Fire apparatus. And when Deloitte and I were first married and Depression years were just kind of getting over with, and Northern Pump was in full bloom for war equipment. There they are. Deloitte took him over there to try to get a job, and the fellow that was head of it refused my dad because he had been an office boy for the Pagels and my dad at Northern Fire. And he said my dad was too qualified for the job. And that really burned Dad.
Hello? You've arrived.
Better shut it off.
I lost it. Means forever.
Let's go ahead and talk about when you and Grandpa got married then. What was that like? Where did that take place?
We were married at Emmanuel Lutheran Church on 22nd and Girard in the pastor's house in front of the fireplace on the 20th of May of 1939.
Did you and Grandpa been going to that church for a long time?
No, but his mother and dad had gone there. And my folks were in Colorado, or they were just coming back from Colorado when we decided to get married. And so that was the only church I had gone to in the last years. And Old River Knoxheim decided that he wouldn't, or they decided that we'd have Old River Knoxheim marry us. And we had an afternoon wedding and a lunch at, or a dinner at Deloitte's family where they lived. And then we left for Taylor's Falls for a couple of days. We went, and of course Grandpa took me, or Deloitte took me fishing. He never forgot his fishing poles. So we, you think that's funny? I didn't think it was so funny. And we stopped at, I think it was Chisago Lake to fish, and we stopped in a little store, and he bought a piece of sausage and a loaf of bread, and then we went fishing. And he takes out his pocket knife and he whacks off a piece of sausage. That was our lunch. Oh, what a honeymoon. And then we came back home. And we lived on 5th and Russell. And we had a little apartment. And then, can't even remember. I didn't get Dewey. Well, we didn't get Dewey until I was pregnant with you.
Who was Dewey?
Dewey was our dog. A little brown and white spaniel. And when I was pregnant with Judy, And Deloitte would make me go over to Glenwood Park and jump on the brush piles to see if there were any rabbits, so the dog would chase the rabbits and he could shoot the rabbits, so we'd have some meat to eat. And then Judy was born. Of course, she was she was due in May, and the end of May, and she decided she'd make another turn, and so then I carried her until the 4th of July when they finally took her. What a firecracker. I always said she had a long fuse.
Who was with you when Judy was born?
Deloitte's dad.
Why, where
Deloitte.
was Deloitte?
Well, Deloitte's mother had come to the hospital with him. They had put me in a day before, and then the next morning, Grandpa brought Grandma Ann to the hospital, and she had been there, and they had said they didn't know whether they could save me or the baby, or maybe neither one of us. And she passed out, so Deloitte had to take her home, and then Grandpa came back to the hospital and stayed with me until Judy was born. So Grandpa was with me when Judy was born, Grandpa Oscar. And so he was the first to see her before Deloitte was. And then, well, you see, I still lived. But he was proud of her. And then Dad came back, and it was when the temperature went up into the hundreds. I was in there 21 days in the hospital, and it kept getting hotter and hotter. And then he brought me home to our apartment there on 5th and Russell, and I had to be in bed a while. So Grandma Ann came and each day and stayed with me so Deloitte could go to work. And that was that, I guess. Then November 11th snowstorm came, and we got snowed in for a while. And we had an old Model 8 Ford, and Grandpa or Deloitte took that to work down to the gas company, but he never got it back home. The snow was too deep. So then we were without a car, so then we had to either bus or depend upon somebody else to get us out somewhere. Till, let me see. Finally they got us all shoveled out. When they did shovel out, the old streetcars used to Y into our, on Russell Avenue there off of Olson Highway. And when they finally got them all shoveled out, here was the streetcar that had been wide back in there. It never did get out. And the snow had drifted from the hill down over that streetcar. And it wasn't long after that then the bus service started coming in, so we had buses. Judy was, 5 years old when Deloitte had to go in service. And those were the hard months because she was at the age of where she missed her dad. And so she cried and cried. She wanted her dad all the time. She didn't care if I was there, but she wanted her dad. And he was gone. And then when he came home, what did he do? The first night he made preparations to go hunting the next day. Big deal. Dropped his duffel bag on the floor and got his guns out and his hunting clothes, and away he went the next day. So when he came home from hunting, I was at the store working. And I was upset because he had left me after he just came home. But it worked out. You have a little differences.
Where was Grandpa Deloitte stationed?
In Batangas, Luzon, in the Philippines.
What did he do there? Do you know what rank he was?
He was a master sergeant, first sergeant, master sergeant in the quartermaster corps of the Army Engineers. And
what were his responsibilities? Wasn't he a baker?
He was a baker when he first went in, he was a lineman for the telephone lineman. And then he went to the islands as as a baker in the quartermaster court. Then he came home and he went back to work for the gas company. He had worked there prior to that. And everything was kind of at a standstill, so he was transferred. They took the men that came back from service and they put them in war plants for a while until there was openings in jobs because they had kept their job and their years of service going when they came back. So he went to work for Northern, not Northern Pump, for Northern Ordnance, making incendiary bullets. And then he came back to the gas company as a radio, worked up in the garage, installing radios in company cars until the meter shop opened again. Then he went back up to the meter shop. And he worked for 43 years plus there. And he retired because he was in ill health. He lost part of his foot and he had a lot of complications. So it was best for him not to work anymore.
Were you still living in that apartment then when he
No,
went to
we
war,
moved
or?
when Carol was born in 1949. She was born in January. We bought the duplex. We bought with Lloyd's folks the duplex on Fremont, and we moved in February after Carol was born, and we've lived there ever since.
What do you remember about Grandpa Deloitte's parents and his life as a boy?
He was born in Buffalo Lake, Minnesota, and then they moved to Minneapolis when he was just a little child, and they lived on 29th Street and 34th Avenue South, and he went to Longfellow School, and then we went on to, we both went to Longfellow, but he was ahead of me, and then we both went to South High School, and that's where we became involved with Lavella. And he played basketball for South High, he played basketball for Parch's Church, and he played basketball for no, the flower company. Can you think? Huh? No. Not Occident. Can't remember the flower company. And he played for the settlement house over there off of Franklin Avenue and Minnehaha in there someplace.
Took communion regularly too, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. And he was upset with the pastor of the church because he was such an ornery old cuss. But he did take communion, and he did when he was confirmed.
And he got into the church wine.
No, he didn't.
No,
Oh,
that's
that
when he was
wasn't Dad.
playing.
Oh.
He was playing basketball.
That was Governor Freeman.
But no, Dad was in on it too. They were playing basketball for Barch's Church, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and Carl Barch, the oldest son of Reverend Barch, and Orville Freeman, who turned out to be governor of Minnesota and Secretary of Agriculture for the United States, and they played basketball in the church basement, and Carl decided one night that he'd go into where they kept the sacramental wine, and he opened up the doors and he got some wine out of there and treated all the boys to some wine. But they were good basketball players, and they all turned out to be good people. So much for the wine.
Tell us more about Lavella.
Lavella was our high school teacher. She was Deloitte's homeroom teacher, and she became part of Bob Miller and Wes Marquette's family. In fact, she was included in all our parties or anything that we ever had, and she always had a lot of entertainment for us at her house, so she became like a mother to all of us. And she was she your godmother?
It's mine.
Daryl's godmother. But I know she when the guys would go golfing and picnicking, that she was always included in it, whether she knew anything about it or not. And they told her how she should dress and how she should. She always had a hat on, and they would give her a bad time about that hat and take it away from her, you know. They didn't treat her like a teacher. They treated her like more like a sister that they were picking on all the time. But we had lots of fun. And she became a part of our family through my daughters, through Judy and Carol, and then through Judy's boys, Daryl and Bill. And then Carol came along, and of course she became even involved in her kids, Jamie and Aaron and Jim. We were all a closely knit family. And then came Annie and Ellen.
And then there was Nora's.
And then there was Nora's restaurant. And Annie and Ellen and Daryl and Liz, they had to go there periodically and go out to Nora's to eat, didn't you? Yeah. Lots of good Christmas times there and Easter times, and the girls learned how to play cribbage with Grandpa Bremer. Great old man.
What do you remember about Grandpa Oscar and Grandma Ann?
Well, Grandpa Oscar he worked maybe sometimes around the clock, especially if weather was bad. They would have to new pipelines in, or if they'd had a gas line break, then he'd have to go. Maybe it was Christmas Eve, maybe it was Thanksgiving. And our dinners were always late, or else we ate without him, and then Deloitte would take soup or something out to the street. He educated himself. He got to the position at the gas company through library books, through the gas company libraries and that, so he could learn, because he never had more than a grade school education. And Grandma was a hard worker. She never worked outside of the home, but she worked in her home. She was a fuss button. She was always there for Grandpa for his meals, right, Judy?
He came home every noon.
Every noon he came home, and he expected that dinner on the table at 12 noon at 5 o'clock at night.
He'd drive from Crosstown. When he got transferred out of Crosstown in 35W, there's a gas company place,
Yeah.
the street department. And he'd drive all the way north, no matter where he was on the street department, wherever they were digging.
If he were at Lake Minnetonka, he always came home, so he had lunch at 12 noon at home. And house cleaning time, the house had to be back in shape before he got home at night. He had wanted no house out of order when he got home. He traveled a lot. Grandma would never go with him until the latter years, and I think she went once to cherry blossom time in Washington. Otherwise, he would travel for the company.
Didn't they go to New York once too?
They might have, I can't remember that.
They went to
But they went one time to cherry blossom, and she really enjoyed it, but she felt she was inferior to the people that he worked with, the big shots and that. And which she wasn't. She wasn't any more inferior than anybody else. But that was the way she was brought up, and she never changed. She worked hard in her home. She saved. She was a good saver, good cook. She couldn't sew with a darn, but she could crochet. She didn't know how to read the books, so she made up her own patterns. And as a result, there are some things around that don't have perfect stitches on, but they turned out to be angels. Right, Judy? Yeah.
Can you tell us something about Grandpa's hunting escapades and a little few stories about the cabin?
Oh dear. A lot of crazy things that they got into hunting. Got chased by bulls. Grandpa Deloitte fell off of the rocks up at St. Francis and into the river, and got struck the car got struck by lightning one time out hunting on Lake Pelican, west of the cities. Up at the cabin that was given to Deloitte and I by Lavella. And Dad loved it up there. He would rather have been there than in Minneapolis. And lots of good fishing. He enjoyed the fishing up there and just the quiet times. But he didn't live to enjoy the final days.
You know what? Grandma's has got a lot of milk in it, that's why.
And what else?
When did you first start working for Dayton?
In, how old was Judy? Was born in 1945. Or, no, March of 46, I must have started. Deloitte was going to leave for service, and allotments were $50 a month, and our rent was $37.50. That didn't leave us much for food or insurance. So the day he left to go and get on the troop train, I went downtown on the bus, and I went down and watched the train pull out of the, I think it was a Milwaukee station. And as it went down the tracks, I sat there and cried, and with tears in my eyes, I walked back to Dayton's and went up to the employment office and asked for a job. And I started out at 29 cents an hour, working 6 days a week. And I worked there until 1982.
This was the downtown store?
Downtown store, yeah. And I went from men's underwear to the computer room in those years.
You took the bus every day?
Every day. And in snowstorms, when the buses didn't run or if there was a bus strike, I walked. Many a time I walked from 5th and Russell, and then the latter years I walked from 43rd and Fremont Avenue North. And people that worked at Dayton's were driving, and they would pass me up on the road. And I thought, I can make it too. So I did. I walked. And I walked home in snowstorms a couple of times. One time as far as where my dad lived, in a high-rise, or in a housing place, down off of Plymouth Avenue and 7th Street. And then Deloitte came and picked me up there. Once I walked as far as Camden, and then he picked me up in Camden. I got that far. The only time I really missed work was when I was in the hospital and had surgery at that. I didn't stay home too often.
Did Grandma Ann take care of Judy then when you were?
She took care of Judy and Carol when she came after she was born. Yeah, when I first started to work at Dayton's, I would take Judy to school in the morning, to John Hayes School, and then when her school time was over, Grandma would walk there and pick her up. One time Judy ran away.
You told me to.
She was being naughty, and she was washing clothes, and she kept after me, for she wanted something, and I said, I can't give it to you. I'm busy right now. And she says, then I'm going to run away. And I said, if that's what you want, just go ahead. And she did. And I looked all over for her, and I couldn't find her. I went down by the creek. I looked up and down the street. I couldn't find her. And so finally I called Grandma Ann, and she lived on Plymouth between Upton and Vincent, which was about 8 blocks away.
I wasn't very old.
No, you weren't. And maybe like 6. And so I called her and I said, you know, I was crying, and she said, what's wrong? And I said, Judy Ann ran away. She says, she did. What did you do to her? I said, I didn't do anything, but I said she was being naughty, and she said she was going to run away, and I told her to go ahead if that's what she wanted, and she did. And she said, wait a minute. She said, I think she's coming up the street. But who did she pamper? She pampered Judy. She should have given her a spanking, but she didn't. See, Judy could do no wrong in Grandma Ann's eyes.
Tell us about the time Grandma Ann chased away the robbers, or escaped from them.
Oh,
That was a lot later, on Fremont.
oh, and you guys were gone, the black dog, Angus, or what was that dog?
Angus, yeah.
Under the bathtub.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I was thinking of Grandpa getting the robber, the guy that robbed the little store on the, across the
Another
alley.
story.
How did that go?
Well, we could hear glass breaking in.
There was a little restaurant.
Yeah, a
Right
little
next to
rest-
where the gas station used to be. Between the gas station and the alley, there was a restaurant. So when they looked out their bedroom, they could see the restaurant.
Yeah, but Lloyd heard, he could see a shadow in the store there, and then he heard glass break. And so I said, don't go over there, and he went there anyway, and he chased the guy and he caught him. And then the cops, or the police said, you shouldn't have done that, and he said, well, I've got him, you know. So anyway, he was going to catch that robber. Well, then I was working, and it was in the winter time, and it was after Grandpa had died. And Lloyd was at work, and he got a phone call at work to come home right away, that Grandma had, there was a fella came down the street, and he was dressed strangely, and he came, I don't know if he tried the front door, but anyway, she got scared, so she locked the back door, and she went into the hallway, going upstairs to our apartment, and he smashed the window in the door and opened the door and came in. We had a little black dog, and Grandma went out our door on the north side through a 4-foot snowdrift in her bare feet to the neighbors next door, and they called the police, and by the time the guy got out the back door, well, he started out the front door because the trail of glass where he broke the window was all through the dining room to the front door. But he had then tried to get out the back way, and by that time the police were there. And she didn't have expensive jewelry. He just took costume jewelry. And he had strewn some of it in the alley. And he did have some in his pocket. But the police picked him up. But he says to the police, don't worry about that dog. He won't hurt you. He's under the bathtub. That little black dog. But he'd scared him so that the poor dog went underneath there, you know. But anyway, Grandma, at her age, she really used her head. Because if she hadn't have gone through there, he could have gotten out of there and probably done more damage than what he had. Just a young kid on drugs. What else?
Do you remember any other stories about Judy and Carol? Maybe some they don't want to admit to?
No.
Any
They
butter,
admit to him.
any butter episodes?
Any what?
Butter episodes?
What, you mean when she was a little kid? She'd hide the butter?
Oh, I
I meant eating.
Huh?
I meant eating.
Well, yeah, but she'd hide it and then eat it. One time she opened the refrigerator door and she drank a whole bottle of Castoria. And I thought, oh, there's something really is going to happen, but nothing did, you know. And I called the doctor and he said, oh, don't worry about it. He said that was as good as taking nothing. It'll just act as if she had never taken anything. It was like an overdose. And it never did.
How about when I had my tonsils out and I ate all the aspargum?
Yeah,
And they healed up in just a matter of hours.
Yeah, she had her tonsils out and ate the whole package of aspargum. She was supposed to chew one little piece. And then the time that Grandpa took the dog's heartworm pill, would you like to hear about that? He had his blood pressure pills sitting on the counter and had the heartworm sitting there, and he goes and he takes the pills. And then he said, what happened to the dog's heartworm? I don't know. It was sitting on the counter, he said. Well, I didn't take it. He says, you know, I'll bet I took it. So I called the veterinarian. No, I called the family doctor. He said, don't call me. He said, call the veterinarian. I don't have anything to do with that. So I called the vet, and he was having a dinner party. But he came to the phone, and he said, what's wrong? And I said, well, I think Deloitte took the dog's heartworm. He said, he hesitated, and he says, I think that's okay, Mrs. Mielke. He said, but if he comes down the sidewalk barking, then call me back. And he lived through it.